the live stream broadcast.
All right, it's going. I'm gonna close my video and duck out.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. Welcome, everybody, and I want to call our meeting to order at 4:31 this afternoon. April, can you help us with a roll call, please?
Okay, am I unmuted, I guess? Okay, Angie Campbell,
Here.
Mona Davenport,
Here.
Stacey Elder,
Here.
Don Holly,
Here.
Claudia Daney,
Here.
Nora Camasini, Carlos Amaya,
Here.
Ken Weston,
Here.
and President Glassman.
Are you there, David?
I'm here now.
Okay. I think we had you muted, or
My fifth login. So,
fifth time's a charm.
yeah.
Okay. So our next agenda item is the approval of minutes. I believe everyone should have received a copy of the minutes via email, and hopefully you had a few minutes to take a look at those. If you haven't, please do so now. And then once you've had a chance to do that, I would accept a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to accept.
We have a motion from Don to accept the minutes. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Second from Carlos to
Carlos Amaya.
the minutes. So April, we will need well, I should ask is everyone in favor? Please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? April, we will have to have a roll call vote to approve the minutes, please.
Okay, Angie Campbell,
Approve, yes, aye.
Mona Davenport,
Approve.
Stacey Elder,
Aye.
Don Holly,
Yes.
Claudia Daney,
I don't think we can hear you, Claudia.
Aye.
Thank you.
and has Nora Camasini joined? I guess not. And Carlos Amaya.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you call roll for Mona Davenport, April?
Yes.
Okay, I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, given that, the minutes shall stand as approved. Our next agenda item is an update from President Glassman. I believe that there may have been some question or confusion a little bit about his prior message or our charge from him. So if you don't mind, President Glassman, would you step in and please share some thoughts with us again?
That's great. Thanks, Angie. And good to see everybody. Man, this semester is just about over, and we can thank ourselves for getting through it. It's been a pretty challenging time. Well, what I wanted, I asked to be put on the agenda because I was talking to one of the members of the committee, and what was brought up was that it's a little bit confusing, a little bit difficult with the charge, particularly relative to the naming, because as we talked about the first time we had the first meeting was, the question was, do we want to change the name? Okay, and that was really the charge of the committee, as opposed to what name it would be if it was decided to change. And what I heard from one of the committee members is that that's becoming kind of complicated in that notion, because what if we have a name that might fit essentially the original intent of the buildings, to recognize or commemorate the great debate that took place. And, that certainly got me thinking, and that certainly is a very, very reasonable, and I can see how that would be a challenging question. I can tell you from those people that I'm hearing from out in the community, they're, and again, it's just the ones that have reached out to me. They continually talk about how the debate was so central to the history of Charleston, and that it is one of the things that has put Charleston on the map. And to have Thomas's Lincoln's grave, a few miles outside of Charleston, and of course the Lincoln cabin and everything else associated with it, that this is the heritage. And some of them will say, and the students come and go, but this is our university, which it's everybody's university, including our students that are here right now. But that led me to think, and I don't know if this is going to make it easier, but I'm here to answer any questions you have. But maybe I should have said, for the charge, is the first question should be, do we want those buildings, Douglas and Lincoln, do we want to still commemorate the debate that took place at the fairgrounds a mile and a half away? Is that our questions, rather than do we want to change Douglas's Hall name? If the committee did their work and they thought, well, we really still want to commemorate that debate that took place, and that is pivotal to the Charleston area and to the city and to our campus, and we would like to offer a suggestion that it be named the Debate Hall East and the Debate Hall West, or the Lincoln Douglas Debate Halls, or whatever name it would be, that you wanted to hold on to that piece of it, that you want those buildings to commemorate that debate, that would be fine for me. What I was trying not to do is say, if you decide that the building should be changed, and no longer are we going to commemorate the debate by those two halls, which are matching halls, that's kind of how it came about. And that we're thinking about, no, we would like to name it. And you've probably heard several names that have been supported so far. I've heard the name, for Obama. I've heard the name for Frederick Douglass. I've heard the name for the first African-American student who graduated from EIU. I've heard the name of our graduate and distinguished alum, who is one of the Tuskegee Airmen. Okay, that's the part that I didn't really want to get in at this time. If we're not going to commemorate the debate, then we've got plenty of time to figure out what name we would like to attach to that building. And, for that matter, if we're no longer going to be commemorating that debate, do we even want to consider, I'm not asking you this, but, the Lincoln Hall. Lincoln is a very precious name, obviously, to all of us and so on. But some individuals would point out, and I'm not trying to make your work harder, and I think perhaps, I know we have one historian in our group, but if you look at, even during the debate, the position that Lincoln was taking was absolutely against slavery, but was not at that time talking about equal citizenry and so on. So I don't know, am I making it more difficult for you, or is this helping at all? I'm going to open it up to you for any kind of question, even if you want to change this all around and tell me what your thoughts are.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed the first meeting, so I apologize to everybody, but what I understand what you are saying is we had two different charges. One is if we want to change the name of the building, and a separate one is what the name would be if we change it.
Yeah, that would come, we wouldn't need to do anything if we weren't going to change the name. So, that would follow later on. And so we would start with the first question, and at that time it was, do we want to change the name? Or I think maybe the better question is, do we want to continue commemorating the debate of the Lincoln Douglas debate relative to those two halls?
President Glassman, in our minutes that we just approved a few minutes ago, we reflected from your charge initially that you had either asked us to recommend to retain the name, recommend that the name had be changed, or that we could not reach a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Is it my understanding that that would still be your charge, that either we are recommending that the name stay, that the name be changed, or that we could not reach a consensus period at this time?
I think unless this confuses you more, okay, I'm saying because of reflecting on what one of the committee members asked me, that the charge would be, do we want to have those two halls to commemorate the Lincoln Douglas debate? Okay. And if that's true, that we do, then what name would you recommend for that? For those two halls? If you decide that we are no longer going to commemorate the Lincoln Douglas debate by decision of the committee, okay, then we will, after that gets reported to me and discussed, and I'll probably discuss it with the committee, then we would go to that next question. Okay, so what type of names are we going to go to? Now, if we're going to keep it commemorating, then you could propose a name. Okay. Or it's possible that when you have that first question, do we or do we not want to commemorate the Lincoln Douglas debate by those two residence halls? You could end up with a tie vote. You can't decide. Some people will say, yes, I think it's important that we still commemorate the debate with the names of these two buildings. And you can have others who would say, no, it's just too difficult to deal with the debate. We're going to leave that arena. Okay. That would be the vote to be that it's equivocal, that you couldn't figure out whether to do it, to continue to commemorate the debate or not. Is that helpful to any members of the committee? Does that make it more complicated and confusing? Does anybody want to share their thoughts?
I just have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
And that is, I understand that if you decide not to continue to commemorate the debate, I'm clear on that section. But if we decide that we do want to retain a commemorative display, or if we want to commemorate the debate, and your question set was what name? And so is it at that point that it's to retain the same name or to change it, or is it specifically just with what name?
If you decide, if the committee decides the recommendation is, we still want to have these two residence halls commemorate the Lincoln Douglas debate. Okay. The follow-up would then be, along with that recommendation, and our recommendation is to continue to have the Douglas Hall name and the Lincoln name. Not going to change the names. maybe you would say, we're not going to change the names, but outside of both of those buildings, we want to have a sign that explains the Lincoln Douglas debates and how these two residence halls were named. Because right now, when we talk to people and say that that Douglas Hall does not commemorate the beliefs and ideology of Stephen Douglas, it's about the debate. People say, I don't get it. They just don't make the connection. And so, you know, if you think you want to keep that name, you may want to have something additional to make sure that people realize that, yes, the name is Douglas, but it's there to commemorate a debate so that everybody understands it without question. Or you might decide people will never get it, even though we want to commemorate the debate. They'll never get it by just having a sign out there. They haven't gotten it for the last 40 years. We want to change the name to Debate Hall Douglas, Debate Hall Lincoln. We want to change the name to Debate Hall East, Debate Hall West. We want to change the name to whatever you think would be appropriate that would still have those buildings connect to the commemoration of the debate that took place. Is that helpful, Angie?
Yeah, yes, it is. And we specifically had on our agenda today to discuss the history and the steps that, you know, some of the prior naming committee work as well. So this ties in very nicely with our upcoming agenda items.
You know, the Faculty Senate had a resolution back a few years ago. And, you know, their suggestion was, this is just for example, that the buildings be called the Lincoln Douglas Debate East and the Lincoln Douglas Debate Residence Hall West or something like that. And even the Faculty Senate said, I mean, that's a mouthful, the Lincoln Douglas Debate Residence Hall East. But that was, you know, that was a suggestion because at that time they were suggesting, you know, we still understand a reasoning, a justification for commemorating the debate and our location to the debate site. But that was given over to the naming committee. So the naming committee had that resolution, you know, to review and so on. And that the naming committee the last time, you know, indicated, as everybody on the committee knows, that we believe that the building should remain a commemorative to commemorate the Lincoln Douglas debate, but we do not feel that the name should be changed. So that's how it went the last time. Anybody has thoughts or questions that they want to ask me, either relative to the explanation now? Again, if you think that I'm making it more difficult or more challenging, you know, please let me know. And that's how I came to this conclusion, was that somebody said, man, you know, you've really made it complicated here, and maybe too complicated. And I certainly don't want to do that.
Okay, I have a question about people in the community or politicians. Have they asked you about this besides this member of the committee?
No, in the past, when we have done this before, I would say that there were some governmental officials that gave me their thoughts on it. But whether I passed them on or not, I can't recall. If there's nothing in the documents, then I didn't pass them on. You know, and most of the time, you know, it was, you know, we'd like to not see a name change, but that we're not influenced by that. And I wasn't influenced back then. I'm not influenced now. This is this is what we would like to do. But I just think that people should have the freedom to have input into whatever decision we make, because it's been so controversial. And it is, as I keep saying, there are justifiable reasons for continuing to commemorate the debate and for moving to something different. Mhm.
So I think one benefit of this framing is that it shifts the focus away from Douglas and onto the debates. In the past, one of the things that I'd worried about with the committee was whether we'd just be doing the same thing that the past two committees have done and not reach a resolution. And this issue keeps coming up again and again. And one of the main reasons for the resistance is the concern that, that we're losing the identity of the town and the connection to that history of the debate. One of my concerns about shifting the focus to debate or not debate is that then the debates become the focus of the conversation, but we still have to deal with Douglas, right? Because if we do decide that we want to keep the debate front and center, then we still have to decide on whether we're going to commemorate Douglas.
We can call there can be a recommendation to name the building anything you want, but is it going to be in the standpoint of related to the debate?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but potentially one of the options would be keep it as it is, right?
That is certainly
Yeah,
an option. Yeah.
And we have to make a recommendation for that, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, if you came up with, we still think that it's important for our heritage and our local heritage to affirm the recognition of the debate with these two residence halls. Okay. I think it would be good to provide a recommendation as to, and we suggest that we leave them as they are, or we suggest that we change the names of the building to X, Y, or Z.
And if the committee, just hypothetically, if the committee were to decide, no, we don't think that the debates are worthy of commemoration, hypothetically, would we then also make recommendations for alternative naming?
No, that would be, once I have that, then we'll move to the second phase of the committee, which we'll have to figure out what kind of plan that we would want to have an input relative to what that name would be. I mean, I'll throw another wrench into this thing. And this is just off the top of my head. I mean, do we keep Lincoln Hall and change its name to Lincoln Douglas Debate Hall? And then free up the Douglas building for then you're still commemorating the debate, which is what both of those halls were named to commemorate the debate. So you've got the Lincoln Douglas Debate Hall, and then we would have to deal with a naming of the other one, which may or may not be related to the debate, since that would already be covered.
Yeah.
And trust me, that just occurred to me in the last 16 seconds. And
Okay.
it's not anything I've even vetted, thought about, or anything else. It's a hard one because there's no win. There's going to be disappointed individuals in any direction, any decision, that's made.
Yeah.
I just want people be able to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that you mentioned that, I have another question. I'm looking at item 4 in the agenda. It says that you want to get feedback from constituents. Who are these constituents? Are they students, scholars, the public?
Yeah, all of those, Carlos. It would be the students that are current here today, our alumni, students who were here in the past, our faculty, that are here, our staff members, the employees, non-faculty employees of the campus, and members of the Charleston community.
And annuitants.
And the annuitants, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Dead silence.
I think that's a good start. I'm interested in learning more about on Agenda 3, the history of the naming of it. I think that's part of the puzzle that we need to unlock here. But
Well, and I'm ready, Angie, if you want, I can share some of that context.
I think
But I want
that-
to make sure that we've had what we need from the president, and we've had a chance to ask him any questions that we needed to ask.
I think we are, Ken, and I'll share with the group as we prepared for the meeting. Ken and I had some discussion about the history, and Ken wasn't fully aware of the history or even some of the prior work that had been done on the naming committees before. I've been on campus for 21 years, so I was a lot more familiar with it, and he learned quite a bit about it. And I thought that we both thought it would be very helpful for the committee to understand the history of this naming and to have that information to share as we think about collecting that feedback and moving forward. So Ken, I am certainly ready for you to move forward and share what you've found.
Thank you, Angie. First, let me just say that the idea of talking about history with a history professor on the committee makes me a little nervous. But if Stacey can be gracious and think of me as maybe a freshman level historian and not a PhD holding administrator, then maybe I'll get through it okay. I think it's really important to understand the context of the naming when the buildings were built in 1951 and 52. There is plenty of documentation in press clippings that I was able to review, and in board documents or in the vote documents. The university, the board at the time, the community, it was very explicit that the two buildings were named as a way to commemorate and celebrate that Charleston was the site of one of the Lincoln Douglas debates. I don't think that that is a fact, I would say, that cannot be disputed. It's in press clippings mentioned in multiple different outlets of news organizations that wrote about it. It appears in some of the official proceedings of the board. It is mentioned then with what was then the precursor to the Board of Governors committee with the state in a report by President Buzzard, again mentioning the context of honoring the Lincoln Douglas debate. So that I think that'll be an important question for people to wrestle with, is that if we know for a fact that the debate was central to the naming, we have to, I think, decide and grapple with and seek feedback on this idea of how powerfully is that notion connected to the idea of EIU using these two residence halls as the way to commemorate that. It doesn't mean that EIU couldn't do it in a different way or doesn't do it in different ways, or there are not other ways in our region that the debates are recognized, honored, and celebrated, but at its time. And so that vote by the board was in February of 51, and the building was completed a year and a half later in August of 52, and the first residents moved in September of 52. And President Buzzard did have a bit of a system for how that name came to be. It was recommended from the faculty, specifically from the social science faculty. And President Buzzard reached out to 50 alumni, people who had graduated as early as 1912 and on, and graduates as recent as the 1940s at that time, and received pretty universal support. There were some other names that were considered at the time. There was consideration of naming one of the buildings after Livingston Lord, the first president of the university. There was a strong interest in perhaps honoring Mr. Lance, who my understanding is he was worked with athletics and physical education, and obviously now we have Lance Ginn. In Old Main, his official name is Livingston C. Lord Administration Building, so Lord has been recognized in another way. And then Blair Hall was another name that was recommended. Of course, we also have a Blair Hall now. And so over the years, there were other ways that were found to acknowledge those particular individuals. And the board voted unanimously to use those names and to put that in place. So that's just kind of the history of the name. I'll stop there to see if people have questions that I might be able to answer based on some of the documents I was able to review and look at about the naming. And then I'll go on to the history of how the committee has grappled with this question.
I have a question.
Yes, Carlos.
Okay, so they were named to honor the debate, but officially they are not. They don't refer officially to the debate. It's only Lincoln and Douglas, right? There is no debate there.
That is correct. And in fact, the official name of Lincoln Hall is Abraham Lincoln Hall. And the official name of Douglas Hall is Stephen A. Douglas Hall. But of course, over time and through, just the normal, what happens on campuses and at colleges and universities, we just refer to them as Lincoln and Douglas. In the same way that no one refers to Whitney Hall as Flossie Whitney Hall. We all just call it Whitney Hall. But you're right to say that there's nothing explicit, and this has maybe led to the confusion down through the ages. And in fact, when the committee dealt with this in 2010, 2011, there was a somewhat embarrassing poll of EIU students about the names, and it was clear that even our students didn't fully understand the context of the debate. In fact, one student is quoted as saying, "Yeah, it's about the debates, and Lincoln and Douglas debated each other, and Stevenson was the moderator." And so that was off by about a century. Stevenson wasn't even born, I think, until 1900. But I think the point that connects to what you're saying, Carlos, is that although that was the original intent to commemorate it, we have not really used the naming convention in a way that brings the debate to its forward light. Any other questions about the history of how the names came to be that?
I wonder in the documents, I don't know if you would have been able to see that in the documents, but was the architectural design submitted with the intent to commemorate the debate, or was the decision for the names made after the architectural design had been approved?
Well, I know this much. I know. I wouldn't say this is conclusive, Claudia, but the naming was voted in February of 1951, and the groundbreaking was in March of 1951. And that suggests to me that they had probably already laid out the L shape of each of those buildings, and they're perfectly symmetrical. It's hard to see that today with Stevenson Tower kind of wedged up in between them. But at the time, it was kind of an open quad between their L-shaped arms. And another factoid, they originally were built to accommodate all just men. They started with women in one of the two halls, but there was the expectation that when Lawson and Andrews were built, that would take some of that capacity off later. But it just emerged that Lincoln and Douglas each became single gender halls, Lincoln for women and Douglas for men over time.
Could I raise another issue about the context for the naming?
Yes.
And that is that, in the early 1950s, historians subscribed to a sort of consensus narrative in which the debates represented these two great men who were nobly exchanging their ideas, right? And since then, we've been looking more critically at the content of the debates. And I think we have to, bear that in mind, that there was a specific context in the early 1950s that sort of looked at those debates as being, in some ways, kind of apolitical.
That's interesting. Well, a great point. I mean, this is 3 years before Brown, so a very different period in our modern American history of how we talked about race, how we talked about our history of slavery, how we talked about the nation's legacy with that original sin. Well, let me move on a little bit to talk about what I could discover in the files about the last 2 times that this committee has grappled with this. And I think probably the only 2 times, but I'm happy to be contradicted if anybody knows of another time that it came up for broad campus discussion. The first time that I found documentation for was in the 2010-2011 timeframe. One of the faculty submitted a proposal to the naming committee, and I think it was endorsed with a faculty senate resolution as well. And at that time, that faculty member was actually Dr. Chris Hanlon, and we're going to hear from Dr. Hanlon during public comment today. He reached out to ask to be able to make public comment today, so we're happy to hear from him. And at that time, he was professor at EIU, and there was a specific proposal made that Douglas Hall be renamed to Douglas Hall, but adding an S so that the hall would honor Frederick Douglass, a contemporary, frankly, of Stephen Douglas and Lincoln, and who obviously has a history of a more noble history on this question of the treatment of slaves and blacks in America. So that came forward. Actually, Dr. Hanlon made that request in March of 2010. It was put on the naming committee's agenda in the fall of 2000. And after collecting feedback from various constituencies, and including various student groups, including student government and the Douglas Hall Council, hearing from the faculty and hearing from other organizations, the naming committee recommended to President Perry that we not rename Douglas Hall, and President Perry affirmed that recommendation. Now, he did attach to his affirmation of that recommendation, the choice to keep the Douglas Hall name, he attached to it a desire and a directive that the university take on a project to make the history of the debate more prominently recognized, displayed, and honored in the Lincoln, Stevenson, Douglas complex. And to that end, there were a number of things recommended, one of which was some kind of display, perhaps a display that could travel, that would be on display in the complex to talk about the history of the debates and the role that Charleston played in that. I do believe there is a display that's like that in the Stevenson Hall lobby. Stevenson serves as the lobby and central meeting point for all 3 buildings. And so I believe that is now there as a legacy from that naming committee's work in 2010 and 2011. The question was reopened again in 2017, 2018. Again, Professor Hanlon was a part of this, but now at that point, Professor Hanlon had moved on from Eastern, and it was, I believe, at Arizona State, and made a new recommendation for a renaming, and this proposal was fielded by President Glassman and referred to the naming committee. This renaming was a recommendation that the buildings, both Lincoln and Douglas, be renamed to Lincoln Douglas Debate Hall East and Lincoln Douglas Debate Hall West. And the committee, again, spent some time with that in 2017 and 2018 and came to a similar conclusion that they would continue to retain the 2018, or continue to retain the Douglas Hall name in spring of 2018. So those are the last 2 times that the group has grappled with, that the naming committee has grappled with this question.
Was part of that first initiative in the 2010-2011 timeframe, did that also include a caveat for educational programming as well as the marker or what have you? I thought there was a recommendation to also provide programming to help educate students.
I'll read from President Perry's note to the university community. He said that he was directing the provost and the VP for Student Affairs to collaborate with the graduate program in historical administration and also the Center for Translational Humanities and the Department of Housing to develop a historical display for the Lincoln Stevenson Douglas complex to address the issues mentioned. Also asking that the Coles County Historical Society be consulted in the development of that display. He hoped that that display could be built to travel, so it could be viewed at different campus installations or even off campus. For example, at the Lincoln Douglas Debate Museum, at the fairgrounds, or in nearby schools. And he intended to use non-appropriated funds to fund that project. And he also noted that other positive educational outcomes could exist. At that time, the celebration of Constitution Day was on September 17th, the day right before the September 18th date of the debate. And so he talked about hosting discussions, debate reenactments, lectures, other scholarly activities. So that's how I think he specifically or intentionally was fairly non-specific, other than with a display recommendation, because I think he wanted to leave it to the creativity of scholars and others with a more developed knowledge base on the debate topic.
Thank you. I remember discussions of that during the time, but I just couldn't remember specifically what it was.
Any other questions about the history of the naming or the last two times the naming committee has worked on this?
Could I ask if the second time the charge to the committee was to review whether or not to change, or was it to change it to East and Debate Halls East and West?
Stacey, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I don't have as good paper records for that second time as the first, but it seemed to me that in discussing this with Steve Rich, who was chairing or convening the committee at that time, that it was another example of Douglas Hall is currently named Douglas. Would you like to change it to this? I don't think they got into the broader question of reflecting of whether the debates, if this was the appropriate vehicle for commemorating the debates on the campus.
And I'm going to add, because I think I was on the committee then in that year, and I think that you're correct, Ken.
Okay.
Choice of what was going. It was just, are we going to have it and are we not? And then I think what happened was Dr. Glassman, we did a lot of focus groups. And so a lot of that came out of that, and that's where it came. The students, I think, student government, Black Student Union, all of those groups were gathered to give information, and that's how that conclusion came.
Okay, I think out of respect for the agenda, I'll hand it back to you, Angie, and let you move this into our next topics.
Okay, well, our next topic is a place for discussion of methods to solicit feedback from the constituent groups that we discussed earlier. And certainly the ones that we named, you know, are the obvious ones, but there could be others as well. So I would just open it for some discussion about your thoughts of different ways that we can solicit some feedback. I'll share some of the comments and feedback that I've received so far, and that would be for open forums, a survey instrument. Obviously, we've already received some emails, but others will receive, will continue, I'm sure, to send email, public comment, and so those are just a few forms of feedback that we can get. But certainly we need to look at, you know, other areas and then discuss how we will go about collecting the feedback as well. Before I jump into that, Ken, though, I do want to pause for one moment. We had talked about, along with that collection of feedback, in some cases, we need to protect the identity of some of those individuals that wish to remain anonymous in the feedback. Did you have a chance to speak with General Counsel about redacting some of that information or how it should be stored?
I apologize, Angie. I haven't had that conversation with Laura McLaughlin, our General Counsel, yet. I will do so. I think it's okay for us to kind of I think we should move forward with this conversation, assuming that we'll have a way to offer anonymity to individuals who provide feedback into this process. I have already done that informally with a couple who have reached out to me. I've explicitly gone back to them and say, I'm going to share this information with the committee. Do you want your name associated with it, or would you rather it be anonymous? And so I do need to get some thoughts from Laura to make sure that it's my intention, for the sake of the committee, to save all of that content in some way. And that's an agenda item we can talk about, is let's come up with some kind of central repository so all of us can be seeing the same things. But I better get that answered before we get too much further down the road.
Again, I'll open it up for discussion on other methods to collect feedback, just open thoughts in general.
Can I just raise the, let's raise the issue of, is anonymity something that's should be protected here? I guess my concern is that we're going to get ideas. We want to have people's opinions that actually reflect the person who's giving them. And I can imagine in an online context that we would get, I don't know, are we really getting people's ideas? I feel like there's an honesty connection in linking it to a real person who's has a position. I don't know. Thoughts on that, if that makes sense.
Tom, what do you
I'm
mean
just
by
confused.
honesty?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go on,
Sorry.
Tracy. Are you going?
I just wondered what Don meant by honesty.
I guess if we had an online format where people were submitting ideas, I guess we trust that the comments represent real people's opinions and not, it's kind of, there's like it's kind of nice to be able to anchor a comment to a real person rather than to just have random comments. And also, I mean, I don't know how important this is, but it seems like it should be coming from an Eastern community context, right? So you can imagine where people start weighing in who have really no connection to Eastern or this community.
I also think that there's one of the difficult things will be decide if we do restrict our, the purview to the Eastern community, whose voices get heard, right? And how do we, are we just counting yes and no votes, or are we listening to the force of arguments, and who has the most at stake in the names?
I agree with, I'm sorry. I agree with Don that if we leave these opinions to anonymous people, anybody can say anything. It would be better to know who is saying what, especially thinking about the political climate. So we want to hear people who are serious about it. It doesn't have to be just the university community, but anybody from outside, from the community here, from the region, they should be objective and responsible about what they are saying, not saying whatever comes to their mind at that moment, because you can see that in social media. People say all these crazy things. It would be better to know who is saying what.
Well, the other
It's fair to
issue,
the debate.
yes, and the other issue is again in an electronic format, you could have one person send five responses. So again, let's anchor it to a real person who has their, has.
And that's what I was going to say too. And again, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to say why it is you don't want it, or why you don't want people to know why you don't want it, unless it's something, you know, it's just the name and not necessarily who it, you know, what really happened and who really did this. So I kind of agree with that one too, that I'm a little confused on why we would want to not voice, why we think it should be changed or if it needs to stay the same.
I will add a little bit of context. I have been approached by 2 different individuals on campus that specifically asked me if I would be sharing their name with their comments, because they had very strong feelings one way or the other, but they did not want their name shared. I don't know if it was because of the position, because they felt that, you know, it was a controversial recommendation one way or the other. I have emails from one of them, but they simply did not want everybody on campus to know their position.
And I think one thing to consider perhaps, and that might be jumping a little bit to the end of the conversation already, is the method mix that we're using, right? I mean, I think if we're only using surveys and online feedback, you know, then that has a bigger role than if we pair that with more in-person dialogue, feedback, focus groups and stuff like that. And I do think that attaching a name to a comment in a person will help keep the discourse and the arguments maybe more on topic in a way. On the other hand, I would have a concern that maybe someone who might have a concern of publicly voicing their opinion would not voice it, right? And then if we're talking about power imbalances, right, we might kind of skew the feedback that we get that way, which I don't know how that would end up, but I think we should consider that that might be something in the dynamic.
Could I make a proposal that maybe we establish a subcommittee that would come up with a proposal to present at the next meeting that we could then discuss and decide upon? Because I don't think we're going to decide tonight, right? It seems like there's some.
I think that that's a great idea. I certainly don't think we're going to get anywhere this evening, but it was just a point to start sharing some ideas. What methods, you know, would you like to see? What are some suggestions? And then perhaps a few of us could get together to start talking about different ways to gather that feedback.
Angie, would you like to solicit right now, maybe poll any members of the naming committee that would want to work on this kind of subgroup that would come back with maybe a methodological framework for the collecting of feedback?
I think that would be a good idea. And since we're in an open public forum, I think what I'll do is just a call on April to just roll call everybody and ask them if they would or would not like to participate. That way we get a chance for everybody to voice their opinion.
Could I ask a procedural question? If there's a certain number, what's the number for the quorum? And then if we have a certain number of people in the room, then it has to be a public meeting, right?
Oh, good point, Stacey, that if the naming committee meets with a quorum level of 4, so I think we would want to make sure this working group, we're a group of 3, so they could really do kind of the roll up your sleeves, iterative work of coming up with a proposal without being burdened with the additional just heavy lifting of minute taking and recording and broadcasting their meeting. So I think 3 is ideal.
And I have a recommendation. Is there someone first that wants to, before we go through the roll, like the first 3 people say yes, but it might be people that really wanted to be on it that, you know, are there people that want to volunteer, or we have to go through the names first?
If we have 3 strong people that would volunteer, you know, we can go that way as well. It's not really a voting issue.
And I would offer up to sweeten the pot that April and I can help staff that group. We don't need to be a part of the three because we'll help you with logistics, meetings, pulling together documentation. We'll do any legwork you want so that it can really rest more on open sharing and talking and discussing among the three of figuring out what to propose.
I'm happy to work on the group if I can get 2 other people to work with me. Any volunteers?
Well, I opened my mouth and said that there should be a subcommittee. So, but I will admit, I don't have research expertise in this kind of data collection. So
I'm not sure that we're at the point of data collection, but maybe
but designing,
Yeah.
meant designing a research methodology.
Anybody with survey design chops who routinely collects data through survey design?
As a social scientist, I guess I have to say.
Great. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I had no idea what to do. So
So do we want one of you, both of you?
no, what I'm saying is I don't know what to do. So I want to be out.
Okay. So does that mean you're in, Claudia?
I guess, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Claudia
Yeah, my pleasure.
and Stacy. Same thing.
Okay.
I'm lost with the research instrument side of things. I don't know what to do there.
Okay, so we can move forward and meet offline, afterwards, in the next day or so to get some thoughts on that. Is there anybody else that have comments, currently right now, maybe the group should take into consideration? If you are yes, Claudia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say maybe one thing that would be good for the subcommittee to know, to be clear of what question or what we're seeking feedback on in the first stage, because I think there could be different directions to take. It seems that from the charge, from the revised charge we received from President Glassman, that the question of whether to continue to honor the debates or not would be a core question. But I'm not sure if I'm understanding that correctly and if everybody's on the same page about that. So I guess what are we seeking? What do we want feedback on at this stage?
I think that you're right. I don't want to speak for the group. I think that may be something that we need to hammer out as a group, as a subgroup, and come back and say, this is what we thought and where can we go from there. I would encourage everybody, if you have specific questions that you would like to see included, forward them to the 3 of us, or to Ken, and he can forward them to us or something, so that, if there's something that you think needs to be included for sure, that we can consider that as well. The more minds working on it, the better. But if there are other forms other than, that you're thinking of now, or if you come up with in the next day or 2 of ways that we can solicit other than just a survey. I know I mentioned open forums. I know I mentioned just email and public comment. If you come up with some other ideas, certainly reach out to us and let us know as well. Okay, are we ready to move forward with our public comment then?
Can I just ask one question? And I don't think we need to take up meeting time for it. If there is anyone who, I'm probably looking more towards my faculty colleagues, but certainly Mona and Noor and Angie can give me thoughts too. But if there's a preferred or easy or efficient platform that you guys are used to using for the sharing of feedback and documents and notes, and I think we need some platform that's common to all of us as the folks on the committee, that all of you can access, see, that's easy to work with, to put content into. Does anybody have any thoughts or suggestions? Say now, or just shoot me an email note, and April and I can look at investigating a way to get something established that's unique to just our group.
Probably the OneDrive, what do we use? The OneDrive.
Just set up a folder in OneDrive.
Yep.
Okay,
Ryan Gibson or Aaron Allison could help us with that.
for sure.
Okay, so are we ready for Chris Hanlon?
I think so.
Okay, Dustin, if you'll let Mr. Hanlon in, please. Ken, will you keep the timer as well this time?
Yes, I'll keep time.
All right. Dr. Hanlon should be on his way in.
Thank you. Okay, Dustin,
Hi.
if you'll let Dr.
Can you hear us, Dr. Hanlon? We don't hear you yet.
Looks like he's froze.
Yeah, he's in the room.
We can just give it a moment.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Can you hear us, Dr. Hanlon? We don't hear you yet.
I can hear you and I can see your faces. Can you hear me all right?
Looks like he's froze. Yes.
You just let me know when you.
Yeah, he's in the room. One thing that I'd like to ask of Dr. Hanlon, I think you've got your YouTube stream going audibly in the background, and there's a little bit of a delay, so that's playing back to us. So.
Okay. How's that sound now? Are we
Much
good?
better.
Okay, thanks for helping me out there. And thank you for letting me talk. Because time is limited, I want to make a few quick points to the committee. But first, I want to point out something about an idea that's been floated today. And that is that if you rename both buildings, you're effectively saying that you don't think Abraham Lincoln's presidency should be commemorated. I find that bizarre. Dr. Elder pointed out it would offer perhaps the benefit of shifting the focus from Douglas to the debates. And I don't know why you would want to do that. Why would you want to shy away from an opportunity to say clearly that Douglas is not worthy of public honors at an institution like Eastern? Anyway, the first point I want to make, when you name a building after an historical figure, you are not simply pointing out that this figure once existed. You're saying that you wish to honor this person, right? You're not saying that they were perfect, but you are saying, here is someone who, on balance, when you take the good with the bad, is worth our praise. By the way, it is nonsensical to claim that a building named after Stephen Douglas does not honor Stephen Douglas, but rather the Charleston debate, even though it does not name that debate. Placing a building across from that one named after Abraham Lincoln doesn't name the debate either. Instead, both buildings tend to imply something like, here were two great Illinoisans, each of whom had some solid points to make. Take your pick. The second point I'd like to make, building names do not promote historical memory. When you strip the name antebellum racist from a building, everyone doesn't suddenly forget the antebellum period. And that's because when you leave the name up, no one remembers the antebellum period. That building name has done nothing to promote understanding of Douglas or Charleston history. And the most hilarious evidence of that, by the way, came about when the Daily Eastern News reported back in 2010 that the debate in Charleston between Lincoln and Douglas was moderated by Adlai Stevenson. They did that, by the way, because of nearby Stevenson Hall. My third point, and this goes to Dr. Wetstein's important assertions about the claims of the namers that they were commemorating the debate and not the individuals. We need to do more here than simply read the things they said about themselves. It wasn't, by the way, the social science faculty who came up with the idea. It was Professor Glenn Seymour of that faculty. And if you read his 1921 dissertation, as I have, you'll find that he equated abolitionists with extremists. Douglas, he said, was a sensible kind of guy, a centrist who was unable to save his country from crazies like Harriet Beecher Stowe. That's what the guy who effectively named this building wrote. As for the wider faculty who agreed with him, well, it would take too long today to properly detail what kind of place EIU was back then. 6 Black students the year the building was named. editorials being published in the Den criticizing desegregation efforts, our first Black homecoming queen stripped of her title when a group of white students complained. I would submit that the name of Douglas Hall is a remnant of that time, and your decision on this building is a conflict with your institution's past, which is precisely, by the way, why many wish either to avoid the discussion or to needlessly complicate it. My fourth point.
I'm sorry, Professor Hanlon, we're out of time.
Really? You can't give me 40 more seconds?
I think if the committee is comfortable with that, I certainly am. We have no one else lined up for public comment. Please proceed.
May I continue? Thank you. My fourth point. Stephen Douglas was an historical figure, distinguished himself as one of the most powerful allies of slavery in the United States. Anyone who thinks there was some kind of equivalence between Douglas and Lincoln certainly never read their debates and is probably simply unversed in 19th century history. His primary career accomplishment was the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which overturned then current law by greatly extending the potential reach of pro-slavery legislation. Further, Douglas's political style on the campaign trail and on the floor of the United States Senate was laced with foul-mouthed, race-baiting rhetoric. He exuded contempt for Black people and for abolitionists. And that's why Frederick Douglass said, upon the senator's death in 1863, quote, "No man of his time has done more to intensify hatred of the Negro." That's Frederick Douglass talking about the guy whose name adorns a dormitory on your campus. Very lastly, and most importantly, this is not some local issue anymore. It is not properly decided in light of local opinion, nor even student opinion. Since Eastern missed its chance to rename this building 10 years ago, the University of Chicago has removed Douglas's name from one of its own buildings, and a city park in Chicago has also been stripped of Douglas's name. This is in keeping with renaming processes now underway around the country and the world. You could have led the way, but if you do not at least now follow, in this context now, you dig in and insist upon continuing to embrace Stephen Douglas, you will distinguish Eastern as a place that is peculiarly determined to align itself with those who come to this issue from a place of resentment over critiques of historical racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, or EIU's own problematic record on race. Renaming is the default position, the easiest thing to do. Not to do so now is to go out of your way in order to embrace Douglas and what he represents. So thank you for your time. I think you should name it for Obama. I think you should name it for Frederick Douglass. Name it for that homecoming queen who lost her crown to a bunch of racists. Denounce Douglas, whomever you name it after, and denounce the Eastern that once enshrined him. Have that courage. Having exhausted every other option, I hope you finally do the right thing here.
Thank you, Dr. Hanlon. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item of order is our next meeting date and future meetings schedule. I'm sure that we could talk for an hour and probably would not come up with a future meeting date tonight. And so what I might implore Ken and Amber to do is to maybe work on a doodle that we can get out in the next day or so to try to find some times for us to meet again.
I think we'd be happy to do that with the caveat that we'll seek a time, not just to get the next meeting, but a carve out a time that, you know, every 2 weeks or whatever frequency we select. I think everybody knows their teaching schedule and their administrative schedule for the spring semester at this point. So we'll be looking for a time that's repeatable well into March and possibly even April.
Agreed. Okay, we've reached the end of the agenda. Is there anything anyone else would like to bring forward or have questions or comments about this evening? Then I will take a motion for adjournment then.
So moved.
I think we can approve a motion to adjourn through unanimous consent.
Yes. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Particular thanks to Dustin White for all of his support with the tech and everything else. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you.